Welcome back. Today I'm talking about design philosophy, which is a subject really close to my heart. I have a book to help us out with this. It's called The Cathedrals of Britain, and it's done by David L. Edwards. It's kind of just a wonderful book that has collected a ton of different photographs of Gothic architecture throughout Great Britain. And I think it's a really good example of what design philosophy means to me and how we can use design philosophy to kickstart a project. So before I begin, I'm going to use Gothic architecture as an analogy. Gothic architecture, when you look at it, has one primary function, and it never strays from that function. Its whole design is simply to point towards heaven and to orient the viewer towards a greater devotion to God. That's basically its entire thesis. I mean, obviously the structures themselves are edifying, they're beautiful, but it's a very strong sort of telos or thesis that they stick to. And I think we can use Gothic architecture as a great example for our own design philosophy. What do I mean by this? Well, okay. For me, I think all great artists stick to a message or stick to a thesis, and they devote all their energy and all their resources and their talents into striking a chord with this message and engaging in a dialogue with the viewer regarding this one topic that they pick, right? So for Gothic architecture, that would be, I mean, you can look at it, everything is pointing to heaven or a different dimension or higher sort of being. For many other artists, it's a different sort of topic, or they have chosen something else that they want to communicate through their art. But we can imitate this sort of stripped down philosophy for our own artistry. Here's another image. There's nothing that exists in this architecture that doesn't point to religion. And in the same way, when I start even from a small sketch to a big canvas, something that I try and keep in mind, what do I want to convey? What is my message behind this? And oftentimes, that sort of thinking is what gets me through the dry spells of my inevitable dissatisfaction with the piece, while I'm painting. And so you can push yourself through struggles while designing when you remind yourself, what are you doing this for? What's your purpose? What's your mission? And it's really an underrated skill, trying to keep yourself on this sort of intellectual diet of just think about what you're trying to convey. And so all design, for me, begins with an idea. That's why I have devoted my life towards art and architecture, is because I have a lot of ideas that I can't convey through speaking or through written word. So I have to convey them through my pen, through my pencil, through my brushes, and that's the beauty of the plastic arts. And the same thing can be for, authors, writers, poets, musicians. Maybe they can't convey an idea through painting it or through speaking it, but they have to sing it, or maybe they have to write down verse about it. And this idea that's important to the artist, that is the key to unlocking a load of potential and keeping us from heartache later down the process of creating. Because we tend to run out of steam, don't we? When we're making paintings and when we're producing art, it's so easy to lose sight of what we're doing this for, and we need the added benefit of sticking to something, of creating for someone or for an idea, for a philosophy, or even for a theology that we have, and so that's where I'm coming from. It's really important in my head to distill my ideas into something intelligible that I can put on the canvas. So, execution is a whole nother topic that we could get on, of how do you get your idea down. But I think if you want to prevent yourself from getting art block or from losing motivation why not adopt a design philosophy where you take something incredibly important to you and you put it on paper, you know, and you almost devote yourself to the idea. And I think that's a really useful design philosophy for me. You know, it doesn't have to be groundbreaking. Obviously, Gothic architecture is a heavy example, but it could be something as little as, well, this makes me happy, you know, well, this makes me inspired, well, this is something that I want to tell the world, you know, or maybe this is an image I can't get out of my head and I need to put it on a canvas, you know, and so, yeah, I think design philosophy doesn't have to be anything more complex than that. It can be really communicating an idea effectively and sticking to a thesis. It's like a good essay. So, I think sometimes I can get a little... The only times I get irritated with art are when I can tell the artist perhaps wasn't thinking and lost sight of the vision that they want to produce in their artwork, you know, and that's when I get a little annoyed. That's when I have to say to the artist, you know, I think you could do better. I think you could convey this idea more effectively. And I'm not saying every piece of art has to have some huge, deeper meaning, but it can really help us, you know, no matter what, it can help us. It certainly couldn't hurt to have a deeper meaning in art. And if the deeper meaning that you want is this art has no meaning, I think that's fair. You know, I think a lot of abstract art is created for the sake of being created. And it's this interesting sort of thought experiment. And so, I don't know, does this make sense? I hope it's making sense. Yeah, sometimes for me, even something like a color is all I need, you know, for a piece of art. I fall in love with the pigment and I say, I want this pigment on the canvas and I want the viewer to directly look at it, to encounter it, to battle it, and then to absorb it, you know? And that's it. Like, that's the only thing. And I think Rothko was a wonderful painter for this reason. I think he gets a lot of flack for his pieces when people only encounter them online and don't see them in person. When you have to encounter a Rothko directly, face to face, then you start to see his genius, you know, and his mastery of pigment and composition and color and all that. But his pieces were nothing more than a landscape derived from one or two colors. But yet, he can make you feel despair. He can make you feel anguish. He can make you feel an overwhelming sense of joy. But he still has that one theme. He doesn't muddy one of his pieces with 3 or 4 themes. It's one. And then maybe there can be some sub-themes below them. But I think that's keeping your art pieces streamlined is a real gift. And that's why I think I really fall in love with monochrome pieces and people who have a tenacity for keeping their palette strict and for keeping their palette limited, you know? Because then I really fall in love with how they've used their tools only and used their pigments on a diet, you know, and used only maybe 2 or 3. Watercolors are a great example of this. J.M.W. Turner only used a few pigments in each piece, you know, he didn't keep muddying them. And we're getting kind of to the plastic effects of painting. But these same tools can be used for the theological or philosophical or metaphysical elements of a painting. You know, you can tell when an artist knows what they're trying to convey and when an artist has been confused. And both are art. I'm not saying one is not art and one is art. But for me, I fall in love more easily with the art that has a strict thesis, that has a mission, you know, that's stuck with it rigorously, like Gothic architecture. There's nothing about this that doesn't scream, I'm pointing to a higher dimension. Look at me, look at heaven, you know? Everything about it is almost anti-gravity. It's floating, it's whimsical, it's beautiful, because they've kept to the theme. They didn't change the theme midway, you know? They had a passion for what they were doing, and I think we can imitate that. And I think you would be a better designer if you stuck to that, you know? And so yeah, that's at least my design philosophy. Other people have different design philosophies, and that's okay. But that's my first step, and that's something I try to remember every time I start a piece. So thanks so much for listening, and I really enjoyed talking to you guys. I'll see you for the next video, and I hope this helps anyone who might be having a little bit of art block or can't decide how to start a piece. It can be very difficult. I completely understand. So anyway, see you next time.